We start off by looking at a classic fantasy setting, described as a fantastical world filled with nothing but swords and magic. But the mood shifts quickly as we learn about the Gozel Dungeon, a place that was supposed to be empty until a teleportation trap sends the characters straight to the most dangerous, deepest floor. The main character suddenly realizes that they are facing the true boss, an incredibly powerful top-tier monster known as the Grim Reaper. As his companion desperately shouts his name, the protagonist, Woka, admits to himself that he actually knows exactly how this story is supposed to go. We see the other girls in his party completely broken and defeated on the ground, as the realization of their situation sinks in. He explains that according to the story, their entire group is destined to be wiped out right here, despite him being a reincarnator who has been trying his best to reach a happy ending. In a moment of pure self-sacrifice, Woka pushes his friend out of the way of a deadly strike while she screams his name in horror. The attack connects with a brutal sound, and we see blood spray across his face as he let out a choked gasp of pain. He collapses against the stone wall with deep, gaping wounds on his leg and face, while his teammate cries out in absolute despair. As he fades away, looking completely exhausted and beaten, his only final thought is a simple expression of frustration that things ended up this way. Woka observes that the monster is enjoying their suffering, even though it could kill them instantly, and he predicts that next the beast will summon endless monsters while he remains helpless. He envisions a horrific end where he is torn apart and his female companions are tortured and eventually eaten alive by the beast. Woka wonders why he realized the truth so late, feeling regretful that he didn't tell everyone to run away after spending 17 years in this new world. He finally understands that this reality is actually based on a manga story and figures out the tragic roles they are supposed to play in this grim plot. He notes that this terrifying monster is only meant to be defeated by a main hero who is scheduled to arrive much later. He realizes they are just side characters, meant to make the real hero look good, essentially a group that was always destined to be defeated from the very start. Looking at his fallen friends, he admits that no one can fight or wait long enough for the hero, and escaping is simply impossible for them. He sighs at the hopelessness of it all, knowing they wouldn't win even at full strength because the story itself has already decided their doom. Suddenly, one of the girls grabs him in a tight, emotional hug, as if she is holding on to him for her dear life. She begs him through her tears not to leave her, crying out his name and pleading for him to stay alive. One of the girls lies on the ground, desperately calling out to her master and pleading with Sir Woka to run away while he still can. She reaches out her hand with tears streaming down her face, screaming for him to escape right this second. Another companion is seen clutching her head in total despair, crying out in a state of pure shock and terror. Woka looks at Atori and Eulitia as the girl holding him keeps apologizing over and over, feeling completely responsible for his injuries. She continues to sob uncontrollably, wishing that she had been stronger or done something differently to prevent this. The scene zooms in on Woka's eye as he internally questions the idea that they are actually doomed by the plot. He clenches his fist with sudden strength, deciding that even if he loses his own life, he must keep his promise to make sure these girls find happiness. Facing the terrifying monster, he realizes that since he knows the original story, he actually knows the secret to winning this fight just like the main hero would. He gives a small, determined smile and tells the confused girl that he's okay with this because he never liked the original ending where everyone died anyway. In this epic final shot, Woka declares with a fierce look that he is going to stay alive just long enough to completely crush this bad end once and for all. Even though he's covered in blood and his leg is badly mangled, Woka starts to focus a mysterious glowing light around his waist. As he slowly stands up to face the monster, his teammate reaches out for him, crying and begging him to wait and not go any further. He continues to walk toward the giant shadow, ignoring the screams of terror as the Grim Reaper prepares to end it all. The monster brings its huge scythe down with a terrifying sound, while a girl's voice echoes through the air, screaming his name in despair. Suddenly, the Grim Reaper looks completely shocked as Woka somehow blocks the deadly attack, causing a massive burst of energy to explode between them. With a look of total calm on his face, he reaches for the handle of his blade as the sound of clashing metal fills the room. He thinks about the special sword drawing technique he spent 10 long years mastering and decides that even if he's not sure it'll work, he has to try. He tells himself to push everything out of his mind except for the enemy in front of him, diving deeper and deeper into his concentration. A feeling of peace washes over him, and he notices that he can't even feel the terrible pain in his body anymore as he enters a state of perfect focus. Standing just one step away from death, he declares that he isn't afraid and promises to throw every single bit of his remaining life into this one final strike. The scene explodes with a blinding flash of light during the final struggle, and we see a close-up of a terrified eye realizing the power of the impact. Suddenly, the chaos is gone, and Woka wakes up safely in a soft bed, groggily asking himself where he could possibly be. He sits up, clutching his head, and wonders what happened to him, just as the door swings open and the girl in the witch hat spots him, calling out to her master in total shock. The girl stands there in the doorway looking incredibly somber, her face filled with the sadness that tells us she's been through a lot while he was out. As she whispers his name, Woka notices her expression and asks her why she has such a terribly long face. She stares at him with wide, trembling eyes, her voice breaking as she tries to say his name through the tears starting to form. Without another word, she suddenly takes off running toward him, screaming his name as she prepares to close the distance. She lets out a small cry and launches herself into a flying tackle, landing right on top of Woka and the bed with a loud thud. Woka is completely caught off guard and asks if she is okay, while she tries to ask him if he's alright, but stops mid-sentence with a confused look. The force of her dive is so strong that Woka lets out a loud shout as he gets knocked backward. Woka tries to play it cool, telling the girl that he just lost his balance for a second. But then he suddenly stumbles with a loud thud, looking completely out of it. We see a close-up of his panicked face as he realizes something is seriously wrong with his body and wonders what is going on. His friend rushes to catch him as he staggers, but he tells her that he is fine and that she should just stay put. She starts crying while trying to smile, apologizing over and over while begging him not to push himself too hard. Woka looks a bit bashful and apologizes for making her worry so much, though his eyes still look pretty surprised. He sits back on the bed and admits that he actually doesn't remember much about yesterday and that his body just isn't moving right. She asks him if he really doesn't remember, and he confirms that he doesn't have a clue what's happening. She looks down sadly and mentions his left leg, making him wonder what could be wrong with it. Woka looks down in absolute shock at his leg. The girl tells Woka that his right eye was cut so badly that he won't be able to see out of it anymore, while he suddenly remembers the terrifying moment he was almost killed by the Grim Reaper in the dungeon. As he looks away, he reflects on how he finally understood the true plot and the tragic roles everyone was forced to play in this world. He remembers his past life in Japan, looking at his phone and recalling the original manga he read back then, admitting that he always hated that dark fantasy story because he only loves happy endings. He thinks about how every single character in that manga, whether they were important or not, suffered through merciless torture and died pitifully. Woka lets out a sharp gasp as he suddenly panics, asking where Ulysses and Atori are, and if they're still unharmed. Just as a loud thud echoes, someone tells him that the girls are safe and had simply gone out shopping. The door opens wide, and both Ulysses and Atori appear at the entrance, looking completely stunned to see Woka awake and sitting up. Roused, Ulysses' eyes immediately fill with tears as she stares at him, her face showing the pure agony she's been feeling while waiting for him to wake up. She can't control her emotions and launches herself at him, crying out his name as she tackles him into the bed with a massive hug. As she sobs into his chest, she tells him through her tears how truly worried she was and how incredibly glad she is that he survived. Atori stands by the bed and softly says his name, admitting that she was also deeply concerned about him. With a pained look on her face, Atori confesses that she was actually worried sick about his well-being during the time he was unconscious. Woka stays silent for a moment, looking at them with a serious expression as he takes in their words. Ulysses quickly pulls away, looking worried as she apologizes and asks if her sudden hug caused any pain to his wounds. Woka looks down at his bandaged leg and realizes that it makes sense for them to be this upset since their comrade has literally lost an eye and a leg. In a surprising move, he tells them all to stop worrying about his body, leaving the girls looking totally confused by his calm attitude. Woka reflects on how he successfully avoided the most sickening and traumatizing bad ending in the entire series. He thinks about how he managed to defeat the plot of that cursed manga, feeling happy that his precious friends didn't have to suffer through the grotesque torment shown in the original version. He reminds himself that he put his life on the line to protect everyone, and seeing them alive in front of him makes all the pain worth it with no regrets. Woka tells the girls not to be so hard on themselves, explaining that losing an eye and a leg is a small price to pay for their safety, and that he is doing fine. However, he admits that he had no idea what kind of reaction that single sentence would trigger in his teammates. During the 10 days he was close to death, the trauma of the battle pushed the girls' fragile hearts past their breaking point, causing something inside them to snap. Woka notices an incredibly tense atmosphere in the room and wonders why they are all acting like they're at a funeral instead of celebrating his recovery. The narrator mentions that while they escaped a literal death, a new kind of trouble is starting as someone screams that they refuse to let go. The girl begs him never to leave her again, promising to stay by his side forever and protect him so that he is never forsaken. Woka tries to get her to listen, but she is clenching onto him so tightly that he can only let out an overwhelmed sigh. One of the girls tells him that he doesn't need to do a single thing or push himself anymore, promising that they will take care of absolutely everything for him from now on. Woka tries to argue that they need to stop and just stay put, but his words don't seem to be reaching them. Atori tells him to just rest easy because it will feel good, vowing that she has decided to give him her entire life and even die for his sake. Woka is left completely speechless and stunned as he realizes just how much the situation has changed. The narrator concludes that every single member of his party has become mentally unwell, while Woka is heard shouting that he can at least wash his own body. We see that the story is moving to the town of Luther, near the dungeon, where Woka was taken to a cathedral for medical treatment after his brutal fight with the Grim Reaper. Woka mentions that he was actually surprised to hear that the main hero of the original story was the one who carried him to safety, and he realizes he is definitely trapped in the world of a dark manga he read in his past life. He reflects on how he barely remembers the details of the plot because it was far too dark for someone like him who loves happy endings, and he thinks about the permanent loss of his eye and leg. He looks up at the ceiling, wondering what he is even supposed to do with his life from this point on. The scene focuses on a girl who's breathing very heavily while staying right next to him as he lies in bed. Woka admits to himself that he just can't get used to seeing something like this every single time he wakes up. He introduces us to his magic teacher, Lizalarte, explaining that while she looks young, she's actually the oldest and tries to act like an elderly lady to be more imposing, though she's become much more overprotective recently. Just then, Eulydia opens the door and gently lets him know that it's morning, calling him her senior. From a high angle, we see Woka noticing that Eulydia has finally come into the room. Woka thinks about wanting to sleep a bit more, while Eulydia looks at his bandaged head and begs him never to push himself to his limits again. She tells him with a very serious expression that he won't have to do a single thing anymore because she will take care of all his needs forever, an idea that Woka finds absolutely terrifying. He sits up with a start, looking pretty nervous as he tells Eulydia good morning. She gives him a huge, bright smile while greeting her senior back for the day. Eulydia then turns toward the bed and lets Lissel know that she needs to wake up too because the morning has already started. We see Lissel groggily waking up while Eulydia tells her it is time to get up, even though Lissel just wants to keep sleeping. Woka watches them, thinking about how their personalities seem to have completely switched places. Eulydia tells Woka that she is bringing his breakfast and asks what his plans are for the day, promising to make everything perfect for him. Woka just thanks her, looking a bit overwhelmed by all the sudden attention. Woka explains that he wants to take it easy today to get used to his injured body after everything that happened. He looks calm on the outside, but you can tell he's still processing his new situation. Eulydia looks incredibly sad and asks if he thinks she isn't dependable enough to take care of him. She really seems to be taking his desire for a little independence as a personal failure. Woka gets nervous, thinking about how in his old world, letting a 13-year-old girl do everything for him would feel totally wrong. He quickly tells her that she is actually too dependable and he's just afraid of relying on her too much. Eulydia shuts him down immediately, saying it's only natural for her to worry. Even though Woka tries to say he's fine, she isn't listening to his excuses at all. She explains that since he almost died and now has permanent injuries, she could never forgive herself if she left his side. She tells him that the whole party has made a vow to protect him no matter what happens. Suddenly switching moods, she gets super pumped and asks again what his plans are. Woka is internally screaming because her sudden intensity is literally scaring him to death. She keeps asking if she can be of any assistance with a fixed smile on her face. Woka wonders if she has turned into some kind of programmed character from a video game. Woka looks at her and thinks that his suspicions about her total change in personality were definitely right. We get a close-up of her face, and the narrator points out that although she's smiling, the warmth doesn't even reach her eyes anymore. She just keeps asking what she can do for him over and over. Woka tries to give her a simple task by asking for water for himself and the master. Eulydia gets upset at herself for forgetting such a basic thing and calls herself silly.
She drags Lysel away to go get ready and fetch the water, while Woka rubs his stomach in pain from all the stress the girls are putting him through. Woka thinks back to how Eulydia used to be a responsible person, but he realizes she had never been this level of crazy or overprotective before. We learn that Eulydia is a young swordswoman who joined the group because she admired Woka's amazing skills. She used to be a very quiet and modest girl, which makes her current behavior even more shocking. The narrator explains that Eulydia's talent was so incredible it made her own brothers jealous, making her almost quit, though Woka admits her skills are something he could only dream of. Woka looks off to the side with a somber expression, simply thinking about the sword and what it represents for him now. He tells himself that he should probably get changed before his master and the others return, but as he tries to push himself up, he realizes something is very wrong. With a sudden shout of pain, he loses his balance entirely and crashes toward the floor with a heavy thud. As he lies there groaning, he wonders why he can't move properly, while we see the shock and pain visible in his one good eye. The reality finally sinks in as he remembers that his left leg is actually gone now, leaving him unable to stand. Hearing footsteps approaching, he thinks it is a good thing no one saw him fall, because he doesn't want them to worry or make a big scene. Suddenly, the master bursts into the room and screams Woka's name in absolute terror. Woka looks up from the floor and lets out a small sound of surprise as she finds him in such a pathetic state. He tries to play it cool by saying he just slipped, but his master's face goes completely pale with a look of pure horror. She rushes over to him in a total panic, screaming to know if he's all right or if something terrible has happened to him again. She pulls him into a tight embrace, calling him a stupid disciple for overexerting himself, and yelling at him for not taking it easy. In a state of pure hysteria, she wonders if his wounds have reopened and offers to fetch help immediately, while Woka desperately tries to tell her he is fine. She looks him in the eyes and begs him to tell her if anything feels off, insisting that he needs to be upfront with her about any pain he feels. Clutching his clothes with trembling hands, she whispers that she would never be able to live with herself if something happened to him again. Woka tries to reassure his companion that he is seriously all right and apologizes for making her worry, then politely asks if she can help him get back into bed. The master asks him what happened and offers to go fetch him some water, while Woka seems to hesitate on how to explain himself. Woka admits that for some reason he still had the strange sensation that his left leg was still there, even though it's gone. He wonders if the feeling is called a phantom limb and mentions how he wobbled while trying to stand up normally, noting that he really needs to get used to his new body. The master stays silent for a moment before sadly acknowledging how difficult it must be to lose a leg and an eye, while Woka notices a strange shift in her tone. She suddenly breaks down into tears and apologizes profusely, but then she snaps at him asking how he can be so calm and if the situation doesn't even frustrate him. Woka looks away, wondering why she would ask such a thing when his reaction seems like the only logical one to have. He confesses to her that he never actually expected to survive that terrifying boss fight in the first place, which seems to catch her off guard. He explains that because he managed to protect all of his friends and still stay alive, he feels more relief than sadness about his injuries. Woka tells her that she doesn't need to take it to heart, but she clenches her fist and cuts him off with another tearful apology. She begs for his forgiveness while weeping, blaming herself for accepting the quest and calling herself useless since he has to suffer for her mistakes. Woka is completely startled by her intense outburst and wonders why she is crying so hard as he tries to call out to her.
The pressure of the situation and her overwhelming guilt start to give Woka a massive stomach ache from all the stress. The view shifts to the outside of the building as the narrator suggests that the atmosphere inside is getting so intense it might just burst. A bit later, Woka wakes up and stretches, complaining about how staying in bed all day is boring him to death and wishing he could get back to training. Woka lies in bed thinking that if he makes even a small, selfish request, his master and the others will just end up worrying about him even more. He reflects on the battle and admits he's had a nagging feeling that everything his companions say and do lately has become a bit too much for him to handle. Looking up, he thinks he can't really blame them because seeing their friend on the verge of death with permanent injuries would be hard for anyone. He realizes that the entire experience must have taken a massive emotional toll on the girls who managed to survive the dungeon. He's certain that they are being eaten away by guilt because they weren't strong enough to protect him when it mattered most. Woka acknowledges that if he were in their shoes, he would also be wallowing in a deep sense of powerlessness right now. He wonders what he should do next, realizing that the incident has likely sent all of his friends into a serious downward spiral. He stares blankly, questioning if he can even make a comeback as a professional swordsman now that he's lost his right eye and his dominant foot. We see a memory of him standing tall, remembering how he honed his skills to perfection simply because he had a childish fascination with looking cool. He covers his face, admitting that he was so desperate during that life-or-death struggle that he doesn't even remember the details of how he beat the Grim Reaper. Looking out at the town, he notes that since they've deviated from the original plot, there's no telling what kind of unhinged dangers this dark fantasy world has waiting for them. He wonders if this world has a high-quality prosthetic leg that could give him one more chance to walk the path of a warrior. Suddenly, the mood shifts completely as Atori jumps onto the bed and hovers directly over him with a very intense look in her eyes. Woka shouts her name in total shock, but she tells him to relax, claiming she was just trying to attack him, which leaves him completely baffled. He sighs and tells the extreme battle junkie to give him a break, reminding her to actually look at the state of his missing leg. She suggests that she can do all the moving and that it'll feel good, but he begs her to stop because his master could walk in at any second and see them like this. The narrator explains that Atori is a heavy fighter from a legendary warrior race as she looks down at him and asks if his leg is still hurting. Woka explains that holy magic already healed the wound so it doesn't hurt, but he internally panics, wondering if she's about to ask him to start sparring with her immediately. Atori looks directly at Woka and mentions that she has already hunted down most of the monsters in the nearby area, stating that she feels quite relieved about it. Woka realizes just how crazy strong she is and starts thinking about how Atori, Ulithia, and his master are all incredible powerhouses, which makes him worry that his injuries have turned him into nothing more than baggage for the team. He calls out to Atori and explains that since he is still struggling to get used to his damaged body, he won't be able to participate in any fighting for a while. As he tries to suggest that she doesn't have to stay with someone as impaired as him, Atori suddenly moves in close and declares that there's absolutely no way she would ever leave him alone. Leaning right over him, she confesses that her failure to protect him resulted in his terrible wounds, which she considers a sin that their god absolutely hates. She notes that their leader, the master, has drilled this idea into them many times. She stares into his eyes and explains their custom rule, which is that if someone saves your life, you must pay back that favor with your own life. The scene zooms in on her face as she begins to say that because of this debt, with an incredibly serious look, she vows to dedicate every single part of herself to him, claiming that every strand of her hair, her blood, and even her soul belong to him now, as she lives and dies only for his sake. We see a reflection of Woka in her eye as she softly tells him to just rest easy and not worry about a thing. Woka is visibly sweating as he thanks her for being so considerate, but the mood breaks when Atori suddenly asks if she can attack him again, which he flatly refuses. She looks a bit disappointed and asks if he would prefer to be the one doing the attacking instead, saying she wouldn't mind that at all, just as someone knocks loudly on the door.
Roush.
Ulithia opens the door and tells Atori it's time to go shopping, so Atori says goodbye to Woka, who gives a very shaky response as they leave. The room goes quiet as the door rattles shut, leaving Woka sitting there alone in total silence. Woka is completely bug-eyed and traumatized, thinking to himself that every single girl in his party has become exactly the same, and that their care for him is way too heavy to handle. He clutches his head in despair, realizing he'll be in deep trouble if he upsets any of them, and laments that while he avoided the original dark plot, he's accidentally entered a different kind of nightmare. He decides he has to do everything possible to help all three of them recover their sanity. He tells himself that he doesn't care if this is a manga world, because nothing changes the fact that his friends are irreplaceable comrades whom he is glad to have saved from a terrible fate. He stares ahead with a sharp and focused eye, deciding that his new mission is to make sure every one of them finds a true happy ending. Looking down at his lap, he worries that his current state is causing the girls too much trouble and fears that his dependency will eventually drain them mentally. He clenches his fist tightly and swears to himself that he must find a way to handle things using his own strength instead of relying on others for everything. With a determined expression, he vows to do everything in his power to give everyone the happiness they deserve, even though the sheer stress of the situation is making his stomach hurt. As we look out at the quiet town, he decides that his first step will be to start working out right there on his bed so he can regain his normal life as soon as possible.